Sarah Mitchell sat at her modern glass desk on the 32nd floor of Madison and Brooks Advertising, watching the morning sun reflect off nearby skyscrapers. It had been exactly 1 month since she started working at one of New York's most prestigious advertising firms, and every day felt like a new adventure. At 28 years old, Sarah had already accomplished more than many people her age. Her journey hadn't been easy, but her determination had carried her through every challenge. Growing up in a middle-class family in Baltimore, she had worked part-time jobs since high school to save for college. Her parents, both schoolteachers, had taught her the value of education and hard work. The morning started like any other, with Sarah arriving at 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes before most of her colleagues. She liked these quiet moments when she could organize her thoughts and prepare for the day ahead. Her desk, neat and organized, displayed a small collection of personal items. A family photo, a small plant her mother had given her for good luck, and her Howard University diploma that she'd earned with honors. Looking through her calendar, Sarah smiled at her packed schedule. In just 1 month, she had become an essential part of 3 major advertising campaigns. Her latest project, a revolutionary approach to marketing sustainable products to younger consumers, had caught everyone's attention. The numbers spoke for themselves. Early testing showed engagement rates 40% higher than industry standards. As she sipped her morning coffee from her favorite blue mug, Sarah's computer pinged with new emails. Among them was a message from Janet Chen, her immediate supervisor, praising her recent work on the eco-friendly brands campaign. "Outstanding analysis, Sarah. Your fresh perspective is exactly what we needed," the email read. Sarah felt a warm sense of pride. Recognition for her hard work meant everything to her. The office gradually came to life as more employees arrived. Sarah enjoyed watching the diverse mix of people filling the open-plan office space. Coming from Howard University, one of the most prestigious historically black colleges, she had always valued diversity in the workplace. Madison and Brooks had impressed her during the interview process with their stated commitment to creating an inclusive environment. Thomas from it waved as he passed by, followed by Maria from accounting, who stopped to chat about their upcoming lunch plans. In just a month, Sarah had built friendly relationships with colleagues across different departments. Her natural ability to connect with people, combined with her professional expertise, made her stand out in the competitive advertising world. Opening her presentation slides for the afternoon meeting, Sarah reviewed her latest campaign proposals. Her approach combined traditional marketing wisdom with modern digital strategies, something she had studied extensively during her MBA program. She had spent countless hours researching consumer behavior and market trends, ensuring every recommendation was backed by solid data. A group of interns passed by her desk, and Sarah remembered her own internship days from a few years ago. She made a mental note to mentor some of the new interns. Someone had done the same for her when she was starting out, and she believed in paying it forward. Success meant nothing if you couldn't help others climb the ladder too. Around 9:30 a.m., Sarah headed to the break room for a quick coffee refill. The wall-mounted TV was showing financial news, and she caught a glimpse of Madison and Brooks' stock prices. They were up again. The company's success made her feel even more motivated to contribute her best work. Returning to her desk, Sarah found an invitation to present at next week's board meeting. Her heart skipped a beat. This was a huge opportunity. Usually, new employees didn't get to present to the board for at least 6 months. But her innovative campaigns had caught upper management's attention. She immediately began preparing notes, determined to make the most of this chance. As the morning progressed, Sarah joined a team brainstorming session. Her colleagues respected her input, often turning to her for fresh perspectives on challenging projects. She had quickly earned a reputation for finding creative solutions to complex marketing problems, combining her academic knowledge with practical insights. Looking at the clock showing 11 o'clock a.m., Sarah knew the day was just beginning. She had a full schedule ahead, including team meetings, client calls, and campaign planning sessions. But she felt ready for anything. After all, each day at Madison and Brooks brought her closer to her dreams, and she was determined to make every moment count. Little did Sarah know that the next few days would test her in ways she never expected, turning her rising career path into an. The marketing team gathered in Conference Room B for their weekly presentation meeting. It was Tuesday afternoon, and Sarah had spent hours preparing her slides about the new sustainable products campaign. The room slowly filled with familiar faces, account managers, creative directors, and several department heads who had specifically requested to attend after hearing about Sarah's innovative approach. The conference room was modern and spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view of the city. Sarah stood near the front, connecting her laptop to the projector while exchanging friendly smiles with her colleagues. Janet Chen, her supervisor, gave her an encouraging nod from the first row. The atmosphere was professional but relaxed, typical of Madison and Brooks' usual meetings. As Sarah was about to begin, the door opened once more. Marcus Henderson, a middle-aged manager from the traditional marketing department, walked in. Sarah had seen him around the office but had never directly worked with him. He had a reputation for being old school and somewhat difficult, but she didn't think much of it as he took a seat at the back of the room. "Good afternoon, everyone," Sarah began confidently. "Today, I'll be presenting our new approach to marketing sustainable products to Generation Z and younger millennials." Her first few slides showed impressive research data and market analysis. The room was engaged, with several people taking notes and nodding along. 10 minutes into her presentation, Sarah was explaining a particularly innovative social media strategy when Henderson's voice cut through the room. "Excuse me," he interrupted, his tone sharp and dismissive. "Where exactly did you get these numbers from?" Sarah maintained her professional composure. "These statistics are from our latest market research study, combined with data from the Nielsen Global Survey," she replied, pointing to the sources listed at the bottom of her slide. Henderson scoffed loudly. "And you really think you understand our target market? How long have you been in this industry?" His voice carried a condescending edge that made several people in the room shift uncomfortably in their seats. "I've been in marketing for 6 years," Sarah responded calmly, "including my internships and previous positions. Our research shows." "Let me guess," Henderson interrupted again, standing up now. "You probably got this job through some diversity program, right? These numbers seem as manufactured as your qualifications." The room fell dead silent. Janet Chen's face showed shock and anger, while other colleagues looked down at their notebooks, clearly uncomfortable. Sarah felt her heart racing, but years of dealing with prejudice had taught her how to handle such situations with dignity. Taking a deep breath, Sarah straightened her shoulders and looked directly at Henderson. "Mr. Henderson, my qualifications include an MBA from Howard University, where I graduated with honors. I've led successful campaigns at 2 previous companies, and my current project is showing results 40% above industry standards. If you have specific questions about the data, I'm happy to address them professionally." Henderson's face reddened, but before he could respond, Janet Chen stood up. "Marcus, that's enough," she said firmly. "Sarah, please continue with your presentation." For the next 20 minutes, Sarah completed her presentation flawlessly, despite the tension in the room. She answered questions from other colleagues with precision and expertise, deliberately avoiding Henderson's raised hand. Her voice remained steady, though her hands shook slightly when changing slides. After the meeting, several colleagues stayed behind to express their support. "That was completely unprofessional of him," whispered Maria from accounting. Thomas from it added, "You handled it like a pro, Sarah." Janet Chen pulled Sarah aside as others left the room. "I want you to know that this behavior is completely unacceptable," she said. "I'll be reporting this to HR immediately. Are you okay?" Sarah nodded, gathering her materials. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice wavered slightly. "It's not my first time dealing with something like this. I just didn't expect it here." As Sarah packed up her laptop, she noticed Henderson watching her through the glass walls of the conference room, his expression unreadable. She held his gaze for a moment before turning away, determined not to let him see how much his words had affected her. Back at her desk, Sarah opened her email and began documenting the incident in detail. She knew the importance of having a record, even though part of her worried about being labeled a troublemaker so early in her time at Madison and Brooks. Still, she refused to let prejudice go unchallenged, regardless of the consequences. What Sarah didn't know was that this confrontation would set in motion a series of events that would shake the very foundation of Madison and Brooks, and her role in it would be far more significant than she could imagine. The rest of Tuesday afternoon passed in a blur for Sarah. After sending her detailed email to HR, she tried to focus on her work, but Henderson's words kept replaying in her mind. The bright, Modern office that had felt so welcoming that morning now seemed different somehow, as if a shadow had fallen over her workspace. Around 4:30 p.m., Patricia Torres from HR stopped by Sarah's desk. "Do you have a moment?" she asked softly. "We'd like to discuss what happened in the meeting." Sarah nodded, following Patricia to a small, private conference room where Janet Chen was already waiting. The HR meeting lasted over an hour. Sarah recounted every detail of the confrontation while Patricia took careful notes on her laptop. Janet added her own observations, describing Henderson's aggressive tone and body language. "We've had informal complaints about him before," Patricia admitted, choosing her words carefully. "But this is the first time someone has formally reported an incident." "Will this affect my position here?" Sarah asked, voicing the fear that had been growing since the incident. Both Patricia and Janet quickly assured her that she was a valued employee and that she had done the right thing by reporting it. On her way home that evening, Sarah called her mother, Dr. Lisa Mitchell. As she walked through the busy New York streets, Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes while describing what had happened. "Baby," her mother said firmly, "you stand your ground. Your father and I didn't raise you to back down from bullies, no matter what title they hold." That night, Sarah barely slept. She lay in her apartment, watching the city lights through her window, wondering if she had made the right choice in filing the report. Her phone buzzed occasionally with supportive messages from colleagues who had witnessed the incident. Maria had texted, "We got your back, girl." Henderson was way out of line. Thomas sent a simple but meaningful message. "Proud of how you handled that today. Let me know if you need anything." Wednesday morning arrived with a mix of support and awkwardness. As Sarah walked through the office, she noticed people reacting in different ways. Some, like her immediate team members, were openly supportive, stopping by her desk with coffee or small words of encouragement. Others seemed unsure how to act, offering tight smiles before quickly looking away. By mid-morning, rumors were circulating that Henderson had been called into several meetings with upper management. Sarah tried to ignore the whispers and focus on her work, but it was challenging. She had a major client presentation the next day and needed to stay focused despite the emotional strain. Around lunchtime, an unexpected ally appeared at her desk, David Martinez, one of the senior creative directors who had attended her presentation. "Sarah," he said, pulling up a chair, "I want you to know something. 5 years ago, my daughter faced a similar situation at her first job. She quit because she felt alone. What you did yesterday, that takes courage, and it helps others find their voice too." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion at his words. "Thank you, Mr. Martinez," she managed to say. He smiled warmly before adding, "And by the way, your presentation was brilliant. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." In the afternoon, Sarah received an email about an important board meeting scheduled for Friday. She was still expected to present her campaign, despite the recent events. Janet stopped by to assure her that this was a good sign. The company's leadership wanted to hear her ideas directly. As Wednesday drew to a close, Sarah noticed something interesting. More people were openly speaking about diversity and inclusion in the office. She overheard conversations about unconscious bias and the importance of creating a truly welcoming workplace. Somehow, her experience had opened up a dialogue that had been simmering beneath the surface. That evening, as Sarah packed up her belongings, she found a small note on her desk. It was from Rachel, one of the quiet interns who rarely spoke up in meetings. The note read, "Thank you for showing me that we don't have to accept disrespect to succeed. You're an inspiration." Sarah carefully folded the note and placed it in her purse. Despite the stress and uncertainty of the past 2 days, she felt stronger. Whatever happened next, she knew she had done the right thing. As she left the office, she had no idea that tomorrow would bring a revelation that would change everything, not just for her, but for the entire company. The sun was setting over Manhattan as Sarah headed home, casting long shadows between the buildings. She felt exhausted but determined. Tomorrow was another day, and she would face it with the same strength and dignity she had shown in that conference room. Little did she know, the biggest surprise was yet to come. Thursday morning arrived with an unexpected buzz at Madison and Brooks. Sarah noticed increased activity on the executive floor as she arrived at her usual early time of 7:45 a.m. Men and women in expensive suits hurried between conference rooms, carrying folders and wearing serious expressions. What Sarah didn't know was that her HR report had triggered something much bigger than a simple workplace complaint. In a private conference room on the 40th floor, a group of executives sat reviewing not just Sarah's incident, but a thick folder of previous unofficial complaints about similar behavior throughout the company. Linda Washington, the head of human resources, stood before the board members with a serious expression. "This isn't just about yesterday's incident," she explained, pointing to the documents spread across the large mahogany table. "We've uncovered a pattern that's been hiding in plain sight." Meanwhile, Sarah tried to focus on her work, unaware of the storm brewing above. She was preparing for tomorrow's board meeting, refining her presentation and checking her numbers one more time. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Remember what I always say, truth stands tall even in the darkest room." She smiled, drawing strength from his words. Around 10 a.m., a series of urgent emails went out to all department heads. Emergency meetings were scheduled throughout the day. Sarah noticed Henderson's office was empty, his door locked and lights off. Whispers spread through the office like wildfire, but no one seemed to know exactly what was happening. In the executive conference room, the investigation continued. Security footage from various meetings was being reviewed, showing Henderson's previous interactions with other employees. Some of the younger staff members had never reported his behavior, fearing for their jobs. Others had filed informal complaints that somehow never made it up the chain of command. Janet Chen was called into several meetings throughout the day. Each time she returned to her desk, her expression was more serious than before. When Sarah asked if everything was okay, Janet just gave her a tight smile and said, "Sometimes things need to get worse before they can get better." By early afternoon, representatives from the company's legal department had joined the investigation. They set up in one of the smaller conference rooms, interviewing selected employees one by one. Sarah watched as Maria from accounting emerged from one such interview, looking shaken but determined. Thomas from it stopped by Sarah's desk with a coffee. "You won't believe this," he whispered, "but they're reviewing all the internal communications from the past year. Something big is happening." Sarah sipped her coffee thoughtfully, wondering how her simple HR report had sparked such intense activity. Around 3 p.m., Sarah was surprised to see Rachel, the young intern who had left her the supportive note, being escorted to the interview room. When Rachel returned 30 minutes later, her eyes were red, but she held her head high. She stopped by Sarah's desk and whispered, "They asked me about last month's marketing meeting. I finally told them what Henderson said to me." The investigation team worked late into the evening. Through the glass walls of the conference rooms, Sarah could see serious discussions taking place, with people pointing at documents and shaking their heads. The normally quiet HR department was bustling with activity, with staff members pulling old files and reviewing past incidents. As the day went down, Patricia from HR visited Sarah again. "I can't tell you everything," she said quietly, "but I want you to know that your courage in speaking up has helped us uncover some important things. More than you know." She paused, then added, "Make sure you're well prepared for tomorrow's board meeting. It's going to be significant." Sarah stayed late that evening, polishing her presentation one final time. The office was quieter now, with most people gone home. From her desk, she could still see lights on in the executive floor above, shadows moving behind frosted glass. Something major was happening, but she couldn't quite piece it together. As she finally packed up to leave, Sarah noticed a small group of senior executives leaving the building. They looked tired but purposeful, like people who had made important decisions. One of them glanced in her direction and gave a small nod of acknowledgement. Walking home through the busy New York streets, Sarah felt a strange mix of anxiety and hope. Tomorrow's board meeting loomed in her mind. She had no way of knowing that in less than 24 hours, everything she thought she knew about Madison and Brooks and Marcus Henderson would be turned upside down. The city lights flickered around her as she made her way home, her mind racing with questions about what the next day would bring. The true purpose of today's investigation would soon become clear, and it would change everything. Friday morning arrived with a nervous energy that Sarah could feel as soon as she stepped into the Madison and Brooks building. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a navy blue suit that her mother always said gave her an air of confidence. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., and her presentation materials were ready. The executive floor, where the main boardroom was located, felt different from the rest of the building. The carpet was thicker, the artwork more expensive, and the silence more intense. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, as was her habit, and waited in the elegant reception area outside the boardroom. Janet Chen appeared, looking unusually tense. "Sarah," she said quietly, "whatever happens in there today, just remember you've earned your place here." Before Sarah could ask what she meant, the large wooden doors to the boardroom opened. Patricia from HR gestured for them to enter. The boardroom was impressive, with a massive table that could seat 30 people. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Manhattan. Sarah noticed immediately that something was different. Several senior executives she recognized were present, but there were also many empty seats. Most notably, Marcus Henderson's usual chair was vacant. As Sarah set up her laptop, she heard the main doors open again. The room fell silent. She turned around and felt her heart stop. Walking into the room was a tall, distinguished-looking African-American man in his early 50s. She recognized him immediately from the company website and annual reports. James Thompson, the CEO of Madison and Brooks. But that wasn't what made Sarah's hands freeze over her keyboard. What shocked her was the realization hitting her like a wave. James Thompson had the same build, the same walk, and the same features as Marcus Henderson, minus the gray wig, colored contacts, and makeup that had disguised him. The CEO walked to the head of the table, looking directly at Sarah with kind but serious eyes. The same eyes that had glared at her from Henderson's face just 3 days ago. The room remained silent, watching her reaction. "Miss Mitchell," Thompson spoke, his voice now natural and warm, nothing like Henderson's harsh tones. "Please, take a seat for a moment. I believe I owe you an explanation before you give your presentation." Sarah sank into the nearest chair, her legs feeling weak. Thompson remained standing, addressing not just her but the entire room. "For the past 3 months," he began, "I've been working undercover in various departments of Madison and Brooks. Marcus Henderson was a character I created to understand exactly how our company operates when the CEO isn't watching." He paused, looking around the room. What I discovered was both disappointing and inspiring. Sarah listened, still trying to process what she was hearing, as Thompson continued. "Disappointing because I witnessed discrimination, bias, and unprofessional behavior that has no place in this company. But inspiring because I also saw people like Sarah Mitchell, who stood up against that behavior with grace and courage." The room remained silent as Thompson walked over to where Sarah sat. "Miss Mitchell, I owe you a personal apology. The things I said to you as Henderson were reprehensible. I needed to understand how our employees would react to such behavior, but that doesn't make it right. Your response showed exactly the kind of leadership we need at Madison and Brooks." Sarah found her voice, though it shook slightly. "Sir, I don't know what to say." She glanced around the room, seeing expressions ranging from shock to admiration on her colleagues' faces. Thompson smiled. "You don't need to say anything. Your actions over the past few days have said everything necessary. Now," he gestured to her laptop, "I believe you have a presentation for us. One that I rudely interrupted earlier this week." As Sarah stood to begin her presentation, she noticed Janet Chen wiping away a tear. Patricia from HR was beaming, and several board members were nodding approvingly. The fear and uncertainty of the past few days melted away as she clicked to her first slide. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the boardroom in a warm glow. Sarah took a deep breath and began presenting, knowing that this moment was more than just a marketing presentation. It was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for her, but for everyone at Madison and Brooks. What happened next would transform not only Sarah's career but the entire corporate culture. The CEO's revelation was just the beginning of a much bigger story that would unfold in the days to come. Entire company's culture. The story wasn't over yet, but its direction had changed dramatically. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, Sarah sat in that corner office, ready to begin the next chapter of her journey at Madison and Brooks. The following weeks at Madison and Brooks brought waves of transformation that rippled through every floor of the building. Sarah, now settling into her dual role as marketing director and director of corporate culture and inclusion initiatives, found herself at the center of the most significant changes in the company's history. Monday morning, 2 weeks after the revelation, Sarah stood in Conference Room B, the same room where the confrontation with Henderson had taken place. Now, instead of giving marketing presentations, she was leading the first session of mandatory diversity and inclusion training for senior management. The irony of the location wasn't lost on her. Leadership starts at the top, Sarah explained to the room full of executives. She noticed how differently they looked at her now, with respect, attention, and genuine interest. Our actions set the tone for the entire company. CEO James Thompson sat in the front row, nodding in agreement and setting an example for others. The changes weren't just about training sessions. Sarah's office, now located on the executive floor, had become a busy hub of activity. Her door remained open most of the time, sending a clear message that anyone could come to her with concerns. A steady stream of employees visited throughout each day, sharing their experiences and suggestions. One morning, Rachel, the intern who had found her voice during the investigation, knocked on Sarah's door. "I got offered a full-time position in the marketing department," she announced, beaming with pride. "They said my ideas during the last team meeting really impressed them." Sarah smiled, remembering how quiet Rachel had been just weeks ago. "That's wonderful. How do you feel about speaking up in meetings now?" "Different," Rachel replied thoughtfully. "Like I finally belong here." She paused. "Thank you, Sarah. Not just for what you did that day, but for everything you're doing now." The physical office space was changing too. New posters appeared in the hallways highlighting employee success stories from diverse backgrounds. The break rooms now featured books and magazines about inclusion and leadership. Even the company's website underwent a complete redesign to reflect its renewed commitment to diversity. Sarah worked closely with HR to revamp the hiring process. Patricia Torres became her strong ally in creating blind resume screening procedures and diverse interview panels. "We're seeing a 40% increase in applications from minority candidates," Patricia reported one afternoon, spreading charts across Sarah's desk. "Word is getting out that Madison and Brooks is serious about change." The most significant transformation, however, was in the daily interactions between colleagues. Sarah noticed more mixed groups having lunch together in the cafeteria. Team meetings included voices that had previously been silent. Senior managers were actively seeking input from junior staff members of all backgrounds. One Thursday afternoon, James Thompson stopped by Sarah's office. He found her reviewing applications for the newly created mentorship program. "How are we doing?" he asked, settling into a chair across from her desk. Sarah showed him the stack of papers. "We have more mentor volunteers than we expected. Even some board members have signed up." She paused, then added, "But the real success is in the small things. Yesterday, I saw David Martinez from Creative deliberately include 2 junior designers in a client meeting. Last week, they might have been left out." Thompson nodded approvingly. "I've been watching too. You know what impressed me most? When Janet Chen challenged a client who made an inappropriate comment, she said, and I quote, 'That's not how we do business at Madison and Brooks anymore.' The changes weren't always easy. Some longtime employees resisted the new initiatives, clinging to old ways of thinking. Sarah faced occasional pushback and skepticism, but for every person who resisted, there were many more who embraced the transformation. By the end of the first month, the results were becoming visible in unexpected ways. Employee satisfaction scores showed improvement. Client feedback was increasingly positive. Even the company's social media presence saw increased engagement, with people praising Madison and Brooks for taking real action on diversity and inclusion. Sarah's parents visited her new office one Friday afternoon. Her mother's eyes filled with tears as she read the new title on her daughter's door. Her father simply squeezed her shoulder and said, "You didn't just stand up for yourself that day. You stood up for everyone who needed a voice." As the sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows through the office windows, Sarah reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. What had started as a painful confrontation had sparked a revolution in corporate culture. But this was just the beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new chances to make a difference. The story of Madison and Brooks was being rewritten, one day at a time, and Sarah was proud to be holding the pen. 1 year later, Sarah Mitchell stood at the podium in the grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel. The occasion was the National Business Leadership Awards, and Madison and Brooks was about to receive the prestigious Corporate Culture Excellence Award. The room was filled with business leaders, journalists, and employees from across the country. Looking out at the audience, Sarah spotted many familiar faces. Janet Chen sat with her team, all wearing proud smiles. Rachel, no longer an intern but now a rising star in the marketing department, was recording the moment on her phone. CEO James Thompson sat at the main table, looking nothing like the Marcus Henderson character he had played a year ago. When I joined Madison and Brooks, Sarah began her speech, I never imagined I would be standing here today. Our story of transformation began with a confrontation, one that could have ended very differently. She paused, remembering that tense day in the conference room. But sometimes, the most painful moments become the greatest catalysts for change. The changes at Madison and Brooks over the past year had been remarkable. Employee retention had improved by 60%. The company had hired more diverse talent at all levels, from entry-level positions to senior management, but the numbers only told part of the story. Sarah shared some of the real successes. Last month, our junior analysts felt comfortable enough to challenge a senior director's assumptions during a client presentation. They weren't afraid of retaliation. They knew their insights were valued. That's real change. In the audience, Thomas from It nodded. He had recently been promoted to head of technology innovation, leading a diverse team that was revolutionizing the company's digital capabilities. Maria from accounting had started an employee resource group that now had chapters in 3 different offices. But our proudest achievement, Sarah continued, isn't in the awards or recognition. It's in the stories we hear every day. The mentor who helped a young professional find her voice. The team leader who restructured meetings to ensure everyone is heard. The client who chose us specifically because of our inclusive culture. The past year hadn't been without challenges. Some long-time clients had initially questioned the changes. A few senior employees had resigned, uncomfortable with the new direction, but for every setback, there were multiple victories. Sarah glanced at her parents in the audience. They had supported her through every step of this journey. Her mother wiped away tears as Sarah shared the story of a recent hire, a young woman who had chosen Madison and Brooks over competing offers because she had heard about their commitment to inclusion. Today, Sarah's voice grew stronger. Madison and Brooks isn't just a different company. We're a better company. Our teams are more innovative because they include diverse perspectives. Our solutions are more effective because they consider all voices. Our culture is stronger because it welcomes everyone. James Thompson joined her at the podium to accept the award. When I went undercover as Marcus Henderson, he addressed the crowd. I was looking for problems. Instead, I found solutions, and people like Sarah Mitchell, who showed us what real leadership looks like. After the ceremony, the Madison and Brooks team gathered in the hotel garden. The New York skyline glittered behind them as they celebrated. Rachel, now mentoring new interns herself, raised a toast. To Sarah, who taught us that one person's courage can change everything. Patricia from HR shared some exciting news. Their new hiring practices were being studied by other companies as a model of excellence. Janet Chen announced that their latest employee satisfaction scores were the highest in the company's history. Sarah watched her colleagues, no, her friends, celebrating together. The rigid departmental boundaries of the past had disappeared. People who might never have spoken to each other a year ago were now sharing jokes and stories. As the evening wound down, James Thompson pulled Sarah aside. Remember that day in my office, when I offered you the director position? He asked. I knew you would make changes, but you've exceeded every expectation. We're not just a different company, we're the company we always should have been. Sarah smiled, thinking about the journey. From that confrontation in conference room B to this moment of celebration, every step had mattered. The company's transformation wasn't just about policies or programs. It was about people finding their voice, their courage, and their place. As she looked out at the city lights, Sarah thought about all the other companies out there, all the other employees facing similar challenges. Madison and Brooks had shown that real change was possible. Their story wasn't just a success story, it was a blueprint for transformation. The future held new challenges and opportunities, but Sarah was ready for them. After all, the best stories don't end. They inspire new beginnings. And this was just the beginning of something much bigger than one company or one person. It was the beginning of real change.